So the Khalistanis in Canada have called for an anti-India rally. They're blockading the Indian missions and the High Commission and the consulates in Vancouver, in Toronto and in Ottawa. Barricades have been erected. Police have been deployed around Indian missions in Canada. Toronto, Vancouver and Ottawa missions are seeing some additional police deployment. Police have been deployed as Khalistan backers hold a death to India protests. Posters praising Khalistani terrorists have meanwhile been taken down in Surrey. Protesters told not to use loudspeakers for their hateful comments against India. But are these just half measures being taken very reluctantly under intense pressure? Because the Canadian government and Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister of Canada clearly in the line of global fire. No action has been taken yet against Khalistan's terror backer Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, who shocked the civilized world with his hateful Hindus leave Canada rant. How can that even be permitted in any country that claims to follow rule-based order and claims to be a liberal democracy? There is an atmosphere of anger, anguish and fear among at least a section of Hindus in Canada after Pannu's threat telling Hindus to leave Canada and the inaction of the Justin Trudeau government. I quickly want to cut across to India. Today's ace correspondent on Ground Zero, Anisha Mathur, joins us from Toronto. We also have Mahit Trivedi, who joins us from Vancouver. Anisha, I want to understand from you first, what's the current situation, especially after Pannu's death to India rally and telling Hindus to leave Canada? What's the situation on ground?
Well, Gaurav, I'm outside the Indian consulate in Toronto where a few Khalistan supporters are holding a protest. What is what is something that the Indian government should take very seriously, and the Canadian government should also take very seriously, is the fact that these people are, while holding up the Khalistani flags, sort of have thrown an Indian flag down on the ground. But it doesn't seem that the police here in Canada is going to take any action about the way these people are protesting. The barricading that has been put up around the consulate office, they've hung up their posters out on the barricades themselves. They're walking around with the Indian flag on the ground. Even despite this massive police presence, we're seeing presence of Metropolitan Police, the Federal RCP, the riot police, all sorts of police presence is here. But the way these people are protesting, it seems that they are trying to provoke a response from Indians, from people, from the Indian government. Very clearly, that is because of the way these people are holding their protests. And the call for call against Hindus in Canada that had gone out from Pannu, while it has been condemned by on social media by politicians in Canada, it is still being treated as a free speech issue. We saw Liberal MP Chandra Arya coming out on the media and saying that, well, this kind of a call should not have gone out. The Conservative leader of opposition has criticized this kind of a rant, saying that this kind of hate speech should not have been made, that everybody has the right to live in Canada peacefully. This is also something that the ministers in the Canadian government, in the Trudeau government, came out and said. But right now, as the protest is going on right in front of me, they have blocked off the main entrance to the building where the Indian consulate office is. They've blocked off that main entrance with their posters. And but it is clear that the Canadian police officials who are very closely watching the situation, they're not doing anything to stop the protest itself. And that is something that the Indian government will be will probably be taking very seriously.
Stay with me for a moment, Anisha. I also want to bring in Mahit Trivedi, who joins us from Vancouver. Mahit, India was very concerned at the lack of security at the Indian missions in Canada and lack of security for our diplomats. Their names and their photographs, they were made public. Adequate security measures provided on ground now. What's the situation where you are?
Absolutely. As you can see, right behind me is the Indian consulate in Vancouver, and the security has been beefed up. In fact, I could see police personnel right in the morning. In fact, as soon as dawn, they were present here, making sure they are, overseeing all the arrangements. In fact, if I could just show our viewers the kind of arrangements we see at this point, is that this is the entrance to the Indian consulate, and there is a lot of presence of police inside. In fact, this entire street is completely covered by Canadian police, that is making sure that this protest remains peaceful. Remember, this is a call, a protest which is supposed to be peaceful, but the Canadian police is taking no chances. Remember, this is the downtown area, a busy area, and there are a lot of big offices and big companies having several employees coming here. So they can't take chances, and also the security of the people working in the Indian consulate is their responsibility. There is a sense of message that has been coming out, saying that we will disrupt the functioning of the Indian consulate today with this protest, and that is something the Canadian police will not let happen. In fact, Canada has, in a sense, try to make certain moves to ensure that they try to make sure they save whatever is left between the relationship between India and Canada. They are making positive moves by pulling down the posters that were targeting Indian diplomats at the Sari Gurudwara, where Nijjar was killed. Today's protest is important for them.
Just pulling down a couple of posters, I mean, that's too little, that's too late. Considering that country has blood on its hands, the leadership has blood on their hands for the Kanishk bombing, where more than 300 people were killed, and yet Khalistan terror continues to grow in Canada. I mean, it's a shame, Anisha. And you've been speaking to a large number of people of Indian origin, both the Sikhs and the Hindus and other Canadians there. What's the buzz on ground? Do they see the anguish in India at Canada's support to Khalistan terror and extremism, and of course the criminal gangs there? Anisha, can you hear me? Okay, we do see...
I'm sorry, Gaurav, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, you've been speaking to a cross-section of people, Anisha. You've been speaking to the Hindus, you've been speaking to the Sikhs, you've been speaking to Canadians. Do they realize the anger and anguish in India, given what's happening, the support to Khalistani terrorists, extremists and organized criminal gangs, or some would argue state support?
Well, Gaurav, to be very honest with you, this entire issue is being treated with a lot of cynicism and by the Indian diaspora here in Canada. We've been speaking to persons who are connected to the Hindu community leaders, to Sikh community leaders, to people. They have been saying that it seems that Justin Trudeau was trying to consolidate his popularity with with a particular vote base, which seems to have backfired on him. It is also something that has been a bone of contention and a question of concern for the Hindu community over the last year or two, as there have been cases of temple vandalization as well as intimidation. What I'm also picking up from analysts and journalists who work with the Indian community in the Indian diaspora here is that the Khalistanis seem to be a very aggressive, a very vocal group, but they are a minority. About 5 to 6% of the Sikhs population in Canada. Even in Brampton itself, what I'm hearing is that most people may not actually support them, but they are too intimidated to really oppose them at present. But of course, with the current standoff between India and Canada, the question now that is worrying the Indian diaspora here is what happens next. Will they be able to visit India freely? What will happen to their friends, relatives who want to come to Canada, who want to visit Canada? What happens to those who want to go back home to India? And that is a question that they're asking, that should the Canadian government not have taken all of that into account before making this kind of statements. But right now, now, Gaurav, I will once again repeat, I'm outside the Indian consulate, and if you can give me 20 more seconds to
Of
speak.
course.
I'm so, the posters that are being put up out here, praising Nijjar, calling him a shaheed, calling him a martyr, that is something that will have to be taken very seriously by India and by the Indian government, because it seems that this so-called very aggressive minority is being given space. Right now in front of me, a lot of the Canadian national media, international media is watching these protests, and they are talking to the people who are participating in these protests, and these people are very, very vocally anti-India. So what kind of messaging is going out in the international media here is something that the government of India needs to be concerned about as well.